I'm Beth Brown Limmer. I'm the president of the Vermont Covered Bridge Society. And we are here today for our third podcast video at Okemo Valley TV studio in Ludlow. And we did our first podcast in November, and it was entitled Discovering Vermont Covered Bridge Society. And our second was in January, and we had the title of Exploring Vermont Covered Bridge Society, when we had two guests, one from Bennington and one from Brattleboro. And today is our third, and we are entitling this Everything You Wanted to Know About Covered Bridge Trusses But Were Afraid to Ask. And my guest today is Miles Jenness from Huntington. And Miles is a bridge wright. He's a big timber specialist. And we're delighted to have him because he's going to get into all the nuts and bolts of trusses today. But before we do that, I'm going to share with the viewers and listeners some very exciting news that has happened to the Vermont Covered Bridge Society since we were last together. And that is that the governor of the state of Vermont has issued a congratulatory proclamation. And I'd like to read it for the folks that are listening. And it says, State of Vermont Executive Department, a proclamation. Whereas Vermont has more covered bridges per square mile than any other state in the United States, and whereas there was once more than 500 covered bridges in Vermont, but today less than 1/5 of that number remain, and whereas floods, fires, and the passage of time have claimed many of these iconic structures, taking away these landmarks that have become a distinct part of Vermont's landscape, tourism industry, and culture. And whereas the Vermont Covered Bridge Society was founded in 2000 and adopted the mission of preserving the covered bridges in Vermont that remain, and whereas the Vermont Covered Bridge Society has grown from its inception from a handful of Vermonters to a membership of over 350 bridge enthusiasts from the United States and Canada. And whereas Vermont Covered Bridge Society will celebrate its 25th anniversary as a nonprofit organization in Vermont and is staffed solely by volunteers. And whereas a relationship of cooperation and collaboration with Vermont state agencies, especially the Agency of Transportation, has been built to help preserve these monuments of our state for future generations to enjoy. Now, therefore, I, Philip B. Scott, Governor, herein proclaim August 2nd through the 9th, 2025, as Covered Bridge Week in Vermont, and given under my hand, and he has signed it. The 25th day of February of 2025. So this is the official proclamation that we've gotten. Now, we realized, of course, that we were going to be 25 years old last year. And so we stood up an ad hoc committee as part of the events committee, which I am the chairperson of. And we pulled together lots of ideas that people had given us and narrowed it down to some things that were doable for us. And so we had 4 initiatives. The first thing that we did was we adapted our logo. This is our logo, the inner. And we adapted it for the 25th year, as you can see with the red ring. And we put the logos on some dark green, of course, Green Mountain State, t-shirts. And so we have sold about 40 of these already, primarily to members that were at the fall meeting in September. But we have more that we're going to be selling throughout the year. And so that was one of the things that we did. Then another thing that we did that has just been launched was we decided we would have a poster contest to celebrate Vermont Covered Bridges. So in our newsletter that was published in March, early March, we made an announcement which says the Vermont Covered Bridge Society is sponsoring a contest open to Vermont residents who are 13 to 18 years of age. Design an original 18-inch by 14-inch poster and enter it to win one of 4 prize packages. The submissions are due on May 1st, 2025. And then it goes on to talk about why it is that we're doing it, because we're having our celebration and this and that. The poster must include a depiction of a covered bridge in Vermont, and it must include the words Vermont Covered Bridge Week and the date. It can also include 3 additional words such as celebrate or heritage or etc. And then it talks about the format. And so these announcements for the poster contest went out to 73 high schools and private schools in Vermont. And we have had, they went out on the 26th of February, actually mailed letters to the schools. And we have had quite a bit of response, even now, early, because we're only on the 25th day of March today. So we're hopeful that by the 1st of May, we'll have lots of submissions, and then we'll weed them down to the 4 finalists. And at our spring meeting, which is going to be held on the 7th of June in Saxons River, the people that come will vote for who is the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. So that's pretty new to us. And so the other thing that we have done is we have a book that we sell on our website, which was written by our former president, Joe Nelson, and it has all 100 covered bridges in Vermont. And it's divided up into 14 different tours. It was written in 1997. It was written and published. And we have sold a number of these at our events and a number of them online. But we have had some feedback, from people that they would like something that doesn't have all 100 covered bridges, but has a smaller number that they can tackle more easily. So one of the things that we have done is we have made what we call bridging journals, and we've divided the state up into 4 different regions, and there's 20 to 24 covered bridges in each one of the journals. And we have things that weren't available in 1997, like GPS coordinates and vertical clearances and those kinds of things that have come to the foreground. So these are at the printer now, and they will be available by the 1st of June for people to purchase. Then another thing that we did was we decided that the covered bridge towns, of which there are 49 in Vermont, might like to join us in celebrating our covered bridges, their covered bridges. And so we had a 10-foot by 2-foot vinyl banner designed, which looks like this. It's light blue with red lettering, and of course our logo for the 25th year. And we have offered that to the covered bridge towns so they can buy them and put them on their bridges to celebrate Covered Bridge Week. And we have had some early, very strong interest in purchasing those. So that has been another thing that we have done. So that is where we're at in regards to recent happenings. And now we'll delve in to the meat of our program, which is to discuss the different truss types that you will find on covered bridges in Vermont. So here is a depiction. These are photographs that were done by Peter Cosgrove of Pittsburgh, who is a member, and it shows the different truss types that are found in Vermont. Now, Vermont is rather unique in that we have a variety of truss types. But the town truss, which is right here, this is found on 39 different covered bridges in Vermont. If you go to Bennington County, all of the bridges in Bennington County have a lattice, town lattice truss. For instance, this is the Burt Henry Bridge in North Bennington. And you can see through the sides of the bridge there, the truss. And then this is Silk Road, which is also a town lattice truss. So all the bridges in Bennington County, which there are 5, and all of the bridges in Rutland County, which there are 7, have the town truss. Then we have the Burr Arch truss, and the Burr Arch Bridge, we have 10 of them in Vermont that have that truss type. And the Big Eddy in Waitsfield is one. The Cambridge Junction Bridge, which this is a picture from actually 1997 of the Cambridge Junction or Poland Covered Bridge. Then we have 23 that are Queen Post trusses, and this is a picture of one of them. This is the Martin Covered Bridge or Orton Farm in Marshfield, Vermont. And this is the Lincoln Covered Bridge in Warren, Lincoln Gap. It's also called the Village Covered Bridge. And these are pictures that came from our calendars that we do every year of Vermont Covered Bridges. And we've done that for 4 years, and the 2026 calendar is actually completed and printed and ready to go. Then there's the Paddleford Truss. The Paddleford Truss is this one right here, and this is a bridge in Irisburg that has the only Paddleford Truss still in a bridge on a traveled road in Vermont. And I think this is a good place for us to introduce Miles, because Miles knows quite something about Paddleford trusses, because he disassembled the Sanborn Covered Bridge up in Lyndonville last September?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So tell us and tell our listeners and viewers about that process, if you would, Miles.
Sure. So just to recap, my name is Miles Jenness. I run a company called Vermont Heavy Timber. We do restoration timber framing, and we focus on truss work, so bridges, covered bridges, steeples, churches, meeting houses, but we especially enjoy working on covered bridges and keeping that part of Vermont's history alive. So last year, or a couple years ago now, I knew that the Sanborn Covered Bridge was scheduled to be restored. And I've been keeping my eye open, waiting for the RFP, the request for proposals, and knew they were supposed to come out sometime early last year, and just kept not seeing it. And finally, I reached out, and I think it was through the Covered Bridge Society that I found out, just kind of by happenstance, that the recent flooding of last year that was in, I think it was early July.
Yeah, July.
Had damaged the abutments fairly significantly, and the bridge was in imminent danger of being swept into the river. So I think I found that out on a Monday, and Hurricane Debbie was coming the next Friday, or that Friday, and pretty amazingly, these projects, working for municipalities, working through grant-funded projects, there are a lot of different players, a lot of granting agencies, and the federal government is not necessarily the most nimble, and so generally it takes quite a while to get onto a project like this. And very surprisingly and wonderfully, we were able to have a contract signed, and we were up there working that Wednesday, I think.
2 days later.
2 days later, which is pretty incredible.
Talk about nimble. You guys
Exactly.
are nimble.
Yeah, we were ready to go. I mean, we always make sure to make time for emergency shoring or emergency work to keep these historic structures alive. So we went up there. We took off the siding, which is a big thing because when the river floods, the siding on a bridge can catch a lot of the thrust of the river, and that can be something that helps take a bridge down the river. And so just by removing the siding, you take a lot of the force of the river off the bridge. And then we also cabled the bridge to several anchors that we installed on both sides of the river. And we left it end of the day on Friday. We worked, a couple really long days getting all that done, and then we just sort of said a prayer and
I was going to say,
waited patiently and with bated breath to hear what happened. And the river did come up quite high. It came up pretty much right to the bottom of the bridge, but it didn't actually overtake the bridge. And
because the river was still rising when you were doing all this.
Rising.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And fortunately, Hurricane Debbie was downgraded to, I think, just a northeaster. But we were able to come back the next week, that Monday, and we came back in full force and started taking apart the bridge. So working with Nicole Grattan from the Preservation Trust of Vermont and Bob Durfee, who is one of the head engineers at Dubois and King, the engineering firm that was overseeing that project, and had a lot of help from them, just making sure that we were doing things in such a way that the bridge can get put back together. Obviously, we have a lot of experience with that, but that's a big bridge, and we want to make sure that everything went well. And we started shoring the bridge because the bridge is in quite bad shape, especially the upstream truss was seriously in bad shape. And so we shored the bridge, we braced it, and we actually built a truss, a temporary truss in a horizontal plane to shore the upstream truss of the bridge. Guide the trusses down to the ground on both sides, and then used a 250-ton crane to hoist first one and then the other truss off the river. And so they are sitting there right now, waiting for us. So we actually took the roof sections of the covered bridge and put them. We put the trusses on blocks up out of the flood zone. Anchored them down, and then put the roof section back together on top of those trusses to protect it. And it sits there waiting for, hopefully, us to come back and restore it.
Right.
That RFP is supposed to come out this September.
Yeah, and so that's hopeful that they can get that. Now, they're obviously going to have to rebuild the abutments, Miles?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that has to be done first, obviously, before the trusses are put back on to the abutments.
Yeah.
Now, will you reassemble the bridge in toto and then lift it as a total onto the abutments, or will you do it part and parcel?
I believe that reassembly will be the reverse of disassembly.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you will put it back part and parcel. Okay, so it's going to be from what I understand, there's two different ways that you can restore a bridge: either on dry ground and then drag it or lift it 10-to-1 back onto the abutments, which are oftentimes new or restored. Correct.
Sure.
And then there's the way that you are proposing to do it, which is put it back little by little and build it actually on the abutments.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And that can be a challenge in some ways because you have to work over the river, which has
Yes.
its own challenges. A lot of wearing life jackets and having a rescue dinghy and
Right.
being extra careful
Right.
to make sure the crew is safe.
That was actually one of my questions that popped into my head, like what are the advantages of doing it on dry ground versus doing it, when it's over the river?
Sure.
And
Well, building it on dry ground would be easier in a lot of ways, but to move an entire bridge back across the river, totally doable. I'd prefer to do it that way only because I enjoy a challenge. I'm a rigger at heart.
Yeah.
That's a great rigging challenge.
Yeah.
But I think simplicity and cost-wise, to me, it's easier not to do it that way.
I see. I see.
there's a certain amount of rigging that you have to put in the river, whether it's cribbing towers or blocking,
Right.
to be able to roll the bridge
Right.
across, and that's what was in danger of some flash flood, weather event. And actually, when that bridge was being moved last time by the Graytons, there's a great story about when they were working to take the bridge off the river was rising and it was raining hard, and they had the bridge up on cribbing and were getting ready to pull it back across, and they had to make a sort of last minute decision. Do we put it back down and hope that it stays there, or do we
Go for it.
go for it? And they said they worked till 2 or 3 in the morning,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just barely got it out of there, and I think lost some cribbing in the river.
Wow.
So this is not once but twice
Yeah.
that this bridge
Has had a dramatic, yes, something with its moving, yes, for sure.
Yeah.
But this is a very special bridge because of the Paddleford Truss. And Peter Paddleford is a fellow that was born in 1785, died in 1859. He was born in Enfield, New Hampshire. And he was a builder of railroad bridges, mainly using the long truss. And he eventually designed his own truss based on his years of experience. But the Paddleford Truss was never patented. But it was widely used in New Hampshire and northeastern Vermont, but only 3, as I said before, remain. The Orne or the Black River Bridge, the Lord's Creek Bridge, which is privately owned, and the Sanborn Bridge, which is owned by the town of Lyndonville.
Yep.
And so that will be a very exciting thing, but Arnold Grayton is kind of renowned for his building on dry ground and pulling across the Hall Bridge when that was rebuilt in 1982. He actually pulled it across using the oxen team, which was very big down there, and Saxon's River, and there was a huge crowd of people, of course, that were there for that.
Yep.
There was film that was done about it, and there's people down in that area that remember being there in 1982 to see this. With the turnstile and the oxen coming, and pulling. And so, it's a fascinating thing.
It's actually something I've always wanted to do because I raised a team of oxen once. And,
Oh, there you go. That would be, well.
We've been talking about getting another team.
Indeed. Okay, so because there's so many town truss bridges in Vermont, I want to go back and talk about the guy that actually was the designer of that town. His name was Ithiel Town. He lived in 1784 to 1844. He was an architect from New Haven, Connecticut. And he simplified bridge building by designing a truss comprised of identical parallel, now this is the one up here in the center, identical parallel diagonal members crisscrossed over one another, and sawn planks were used rather than heavy hewn timbers. And where the timbers crossed, and also where they met the upper cord and the lower cord timbers, they were secured with wooden pegs, and Miles is holding one. And they were called either tree nails or trunnels. And Miles is actually familiar with these, obviously, because he's a bridge builder, but has brought today the mechanism in which you would use when you were building the bridge to drill the hole that needs to go through the planks, and so that the trunnel can be driven into the hole to hold the members together. So Miles, tell us about this, if you would.
So this is called a beam drill, or a boring machine, some people know it as. And what you do is you sit right here. So this would be on the timber, in the same direction as the timber, and you'd straddle the timber, and just by hand, there's a catch so it can lower, and then it'll drive itself into the wood. just drill a hole right through the table here, and and then to bring it back up, there's that's a very helpful little track back here, so you can actually run it back upwards like that.
Oh,
and that's how
okay.
you drill your hole. So this is a drill for drilling large holes, and this is exactly what they would have used to drill holes this big, because if you might think about traditional ways of drilling holes, you might think about a bit brace, but to use a bit brace or even a T-handle drill is a lot of work, and a bit brace is not something that's strong enough or big enough to be able to do something like this. So this is the perfect thing right here.
All right, and then they would put obviously the peg. So is the hole slightly larger than, or slightly smaller than the actual trunnel?
It's the exact same size.
Exact same size.
You'd
Okay.
wax or grease up the
I
tunnel
see.
a little bit to,
All right. So they would put some kind of wax like paraffin or some kind of just like engine grease on there?
Yeah, or some maybe even animal fat. I mean,
Okay.
depends when.
I see. And then they would drive it. You can see the squared end with a mallet.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. So these are turned, as opposed to being, made with a draw knife or made by hand.
Okay, and the wood that you would be used usually for the trunnels was what species,
This
Miles?
is white oak, which
White
is
oak.
rot resistant and strong.
Very strong to hold the bridge together.
Exactly. And you might be able to see, so this has a bit of a curve in it, and that's because this is a trunnel that was used in a bridge, and the forces that are put on these trunnels will actually bend them. So it's got a bit of a curve there, and it's a recursive curve. It comes over and then back, and that's because as it passed through the two members, and then had the stresses put on it, it was bent over time, which is pretty cool.
Yes, actually, I was given that by Joe Nelson, our former president, and I believe he told me it came from the Fuller Covered Bridge, when the Fuller Covered Bridge up in Montgomery was disassembled, and it was right around 2000, 2001, and that bridge was rebuilt.
Yeah.
And so they actually got all of the trunnels, the Vermont Covered Bridge Society,
Wow.
and they sold a number of them because this is when the society was in its infancy,
Sure.
and they sold a number of them to fund what they needed to
very
start
cool.
the organization. So yes, that has a storied past, and it is extremely cool. So now, one of the things that I know that you do, and you like to do, is hand hew the actual timbers. And so is the other implement that you brought for that purpose?
Yeah, exactly. So I brought three things here today. This is a broad axe, and so this is what you would use to finish hewing a timber. So it was just a conversion method, a very traditional, the original conversion method to make logs into square or if you need other shapes, sure, but square generally timbers. So you'd use a felling axe at first to rough out the shape, and then this you'd use in this way to shave off and make a really fine, and you can make a really nice square timber and have a really good surface with an axe like this. Mm-hmm. This is actually not a traditional American axe. This is a French Doloir that was made for me by a French blacksmith. But we use certainly traditional American axes as well.
And in some of our bridges that we have in Vermont, and I'm thinking the Cornish-Windsor covered bridge that goes from Windsor, Vermont over to Cornish, New Hampshire, which is built in 1866. It is just absolutely chock full of hand-hewn timbers.
Absolutely.
And is a very good bridge for anyone that is wanting to see what that looks like, to visit for sure. And then the other implement that you brought is a crossbow saw.
It's a crosscut saw.
Crosscut saw.
Yeah. So this is what was traditionally used to fell the trees. This is a tooth pattern called a perforated lance tooth, and this particular saw is a felling saw. So this would be to cut down the trees, and then there would be another saw that was a little bit deeper that would be used to buck up the trees and even to make the larger cuts in the timbers before they had circular saws or chainsaws.
Wow.
So these are just some of the traditional tools that were used to build these bridges.
Obviously a two-man operation, one man on each side.
Yes.
One muscular man on each side.
My wife and I cut down all the trees for a cabin we lived in. And,
Okay. Well,
it takes a lot of teamwork for sure.
yes. Yeah. Very good. Now, what is the purpose to having the teeth staggered like that, Miles, versus just having it be like, I'm familiar with just a saw that has, the teeth in a uniform pattern.
Sure, it's a good question. Let me see if I can take this sheath off to show you a little bit better. So if you think about the way that grain goes in wood, the grain is running, like say this is the log, and the grain is running this way with the log. And so this being a crosscut saw, we were cutting across the grain, cross cut.
Okay.
And so there are 4 teeth for every set of rakers, and the teeth just act as teeth, as little razor edges that sever the grain on either side of the width of this blade. And then the rakers are little chisel teeth that run with the saw, and they scoop out the severed bit of grain in between those 2 cut lines.
Okay.
So it's just like if I made a little cut and then a little cut and then used a chisel to scoop out the center. And so that's happening. Every 4 teeth is a raker, and so that's happening back and forth.
To keep your channel clear, if you will.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
And then the shavings end up in what's called the gullet right here, and then they're exhausted. They fall out, as the saw passes out of the log.
I see. And it would have to be big enough so that it would then fall versus sticking in there.
Sure. But
Okay.
a well-sharpened saw will take a pretty good size shaving. Yeah, a nice big shaving.
I see.
It'll come right out. Yeah.
Okay.
And this is one of the 2 bigger saw makers at the time. Simmons, Diston was the other one, but this is a great example. This doesn't have a lot of use, but this is something that we use occasionally. Often more for show and tell. It's not quite as efficient as a big circular saw or a chainsaw, but we do like to keep these traditions alive and make sure that we know how to use them.
Yes, and I believe you told me you have 20 odd of those in your cache of
maybe 6
tools.
or 7.
6 or 7.
We certainly have 20 odd axes.
20 odd is probably exaggerating.
Well,
all right.
We've got that many
Well,
axes.
regardless, it's great that you brought it, and great that we can see how it is that the pioneers, our ancestors had to do it.
Yeah.
Before battery operated tools and all
Exactly.
kinds of nice things that you have now.
Yeah.
One of the questions I asked Miles when we were riding down from Rutland this morning was whether he actually uses the digital or the laser measuring devices, or whether he has an old-fashioned method in that. And can you tell the viewers what it is that you told me about that?
Well, I certainly will use what we call a disto or a laser tape, but more for very rough measuring. And for restoration, like I was telling you this morning, measuring is everything. You have to have a good measurement of the timbers that you're rebuilding, and so we do it in the old-fashioned way, and it takes quite a bit of time to take these measurements. And the really fun thing, as I was mentioning, is that often with restoration, it's not like you're looking at some nice new clean piece of timber. You're looking at a timber that, well, it's getting replaced for a reason. It's rotten, it's broken, it's couple 100 years old, it's checked, it's shrunk. Mm-hmm. Sometimes because of the drying checking, it actually expands in a certain direction. And maybe there's mistakes. Maybe the apprentice, was cutting this timber, or maybe the master carpenter and had a couple too many drinks before. So it's a lot of detective work to be able to look at these timbers and say, okay, what was the original timber? What did it look like? And how can we replace it? And then also, how can we replace it in a way that it's as good as, or if need be, better? Because sometimes the designs were somewhat underdone, and making sure that we can rebuild these things or repair these things so they really stand the test of time, and no one has to come back for another couple hundred years, hopefully.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, in regards to the different trusses that we see in Vermont, one of the ones that you told me that you have worked on is the Burr arch. And that was one of the earliest patents for covered bridge designs. And Theodore Burr lived from 1771 to 1822. He was a millwright and a builder from Torrington, Connecticut. And he created his first bridge in 1800 when he was 29 years old. The usual Burr truss has 2 arches, but sometimes 4, with multiple king post truss sandwiched in between. Now, the king post truss is the one that the pioneers used to build their barns, correct? It's just one huge king timber, if you will.
I'd say it's the most simple of trusses.
Exactly. Yeah. And that one is this one right here. And this is a single king post truss. And there's only 3 in Vermont that are left that have just the single king post. It's usually a very short bridge, less than 60 feet, I believe.
Absolutely.
And because this king post is the thing that's holding up the center of the bridge. So the 3 that are left in Vermont are the Kidder Hill Bridge down in Grafton, and then there is one up in Northfield, which is the Stony Brook, or they also call it the Moseley Covered Bridge. Mm-hmm. And then the 3rd is the Pine Brook Covered Bridge, which is in Waitsfield. And but the multiple king post is this post, these posts down here. As you can see, king posts, but many of them. And then an arch sometimes added to it. But the Burr arch was patented in 1817. So it's really an early patent. The patent for the town truss was 1820. So these folks were, Theodore Burr and Ishiel Town were contemporaries of each other, and Peter Paddleford came a little later. But there's a Burr Arch covered bridge up in Westford that you're familiar with. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that's the Browns River Bridge in Westford, and that's a beautiful bridge. Anytime we go past a covered bridge, or I go past, I happen to be driving around with my foreman. We were going to look at a different job, and we saw a bridge off in the distance. And we said, all right, we're going to stop by, and we always do an inspection and just make sure that these bridges are in good shape. And if not, let the town know.
Which is why you're perfect as the chairperson of our Bridge Watch Committee.
Because I'm a
because
bridge
you
busybody.
are a bridge watcher extraordinaire, correct?
So we found had some rot in the ends of the arches, and also the bedding timbers, or the bolster beams and the bedding timbers have some rot in them. So we put together a proposal for the town, and I think we're going to be repairing that this summer.
Okay, good. And that's a bypassed bridge.
Exactly.
So you're not going to have to worry about the traffic business.
It is nice. Although I think we might have to park our crane in the road, but
yeah. Yeah, but everyday traffic will probably not be disrupted. No. However, you just recently worked on the Waitsfield Covered Bridge this fall, which was unfortunately struck by an oversized truck. Yeah. And you went down and fairly quickly got on that job too to repair that. And that is right in the village of Waitsfield, and it did disrupt the traffic there, correct? Because the bridge was closed on the days that you were there.
Exactly. We would close it from 7 to 5 when we were working.
Right. And then how many weeks was it actually closed as far as the traffic flow?
I think it was
you were there.
3.5.
3.5?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What did you do to that bridge?
So the truck destroyed the portal opening, damaged a lot of the sheathing, the trim, a whole bunch of the roofing, and also the members of the first sort of truss that is in the roof system. So the crossbeam, the the ridge post, a section of the ridge beam we had to scarf into, and also the plates. But like many bridges, this is not the first or the second or even the third time that this bridge has been hit. And I was just showing the town administrator, York Haverkamp, there the other day. He was looking at the piece that we had replaced and noting that it was different than the next crossbeam in. It's like, well, that's not original either, and neither is the next one.
Oh.
So trucks have driven into this bridge
Yes.
quite a few times and pretty far into it.
Well, we have to give a shout out to the town of Lyndonville because they just this week have put together
It's very exciting.
their headache bar on the Miller's Run Bridge up there, which is a I-beam steel set into concrete beam that will prevent, hopefully, any further assault to the Miller's Run Bridge. Miller's Run Bridge is a bridge that was built originally in 1878, and unfortunately, I can't even tell you the number of times that it's been struck by oversized vehicles, and it was completely rebuilt using some of the original truss members. I think the majority of the truss is from the 1878 bridge, but had to be redone in 1995. And it is now in the best condition, I guess it can be, and hopefully will remain that way because of this headache bar. But it's very fancy because it's got the name of the bridge and 1878 in the top ironwork that goes across. So it's just not a stark across, the I-beam across and then the two I-beams coming down. But Waitsfield has also been talking about a headache bar, correct?
They have, yeah.
And what design, or do they have any, where are they in that process?
Well, we're still trying to make sure that there's no liability incumbent on the town if they install something like that, because we have heard from VDOT or VTrans that there could be some liability, or at least they're worried about that. I'm not actually sure that that's an issue, but obviously it's something that we want to nail down
out first.
Before we
right.
go around telling towns that they should be able to do that.
Yeah. But the ice has been broken by
ice has
Lyndonville,
certainly been broken,
and as they say, kudos to them for sure.
Yeah.
But you had said something to me one time about the Waitsfield. The Waitsfield Covered Bridge is the oldest traveled bridge in the state of Vermont. And so, needless to say, we're concerned about all of our bridges, but certainly the ones that are the most antique, the grandfathers, if you will.
That's from 1833?
1833, that's correct. And so, at one time, they thought it was the pulp mill bridge, and they had an 1820 date on the pulp mill bridge, but the contractor that was hired, Jan Lewandowski, in the 1990s, 1994, 95, to rebuild the restore the pulp mill bridge, actually went to the town records and did the research himself, and it's an 1853 to 54 build on the pulp mill. So pulp mill was knocked off the podium, if you will, as being the grandfather, and now it's the Waitsfield Covered Village Bridge. But you had said something about that you had recommended that perhaps there be some kind of wood chatting or something put over this headache bar to kind of blend in with the bridge, or to make it more aesthetically pleasing for the photographers. Because, of course, that is one of the considerations with the placement of the headache bars, to not interfere with, the person that wants the photograph of the century of this bridge.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know that my husband and I, we travel all over the country to see covered bridges, and in many places, like I'm thinking the Roddy Road Bridge down in Maryland, the headache bar is a good maybe eighth of a mile from the actual bridge, because that's where the turnaround is, because the consideration is not only that you're going to prevent someone from going into the bridge and harming the bridge, but where is a big truck going to turn around And so that's one of the things that has given pause to some towns, because they're like, well, we can put up some kind of a barrier, but then we have a problem with an 18-wheel truck that, how are they going to, back out of there, or turn, is there turning space, all that kind of things. So certainly in Waitsfield, maybe that might be one of the considerations, because that's right in the village.
Exactly. That's a tough one, because there's trucks have to get very close to the bridge just to be able to deliver to the shops that are right next to the bridge.
Yes.
So that actually has to be quite close, whereas a bridge like the Sanderson Bridge in Brandon, which could really use a headache bar.
Yes, it could use a headache bar.
That could have a headache bar that's quite a ways away.
Right, but they could they could site it in such a way, I think, so that the truck could back around or whatever.
I mean,
obviously,
honestly,
the people that have been striking the bridge,
they've got to turn around.
Right, the one guy, he backed out about a half a mile before he could find a place to turn around.
Yeah.
And leave the scene of the last crash. Was he left the scene without reporting it.
Flee.
But anyway, that is the summary of the trusses that we have in Vermont. We didn't talk about the Howe truss. The Howe truss was patented by the fellow's last name was Howe, Howe, in 1840. That truss is often seen in railroad bridges because of the reinforcement with the metal, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, they're a really strong truss, and I was actually down looking at the one in Shoreham not that long ago. So this right here.
This is the one with the metal, with the metal reinforcement rods here.
Yep.
So there's 2 railroad covered bridges left in Vermont. There was once 151. And the last one that was actually in use is the Fisher Railroad Bridge, which is up in Wolcott, Vermont. And this bridge is the East Shoreham Railroad Bridge, which was thrown up as far as use, I believe, in I'm going to say the 1950s, but that might not be correct. But anyway, there is a couple other Howe truss bridges. Emily's Bridge, which is also called Goldbrook or Stowe Hollow Bridge up in Stowe, it has a Howe truss, and that's a much shorter bridge than the 2 railroad bridges. And then there's 2 bridges that go across the Connecticut in the upper northeast section of Vermont. One is the Mount Orne Bridge that crosses from Vermont into New Hampshire, and the other is the Columbia, which is 40 miles further north on the Connecticut River, and those are both Howe trusses. And then our last one that I've got a note of is the Tide Arch. And you know a little bit something because you worked on one of the Tide Arch.
The Holmes Creek Bridge.
Yes, the Holmes Creek Bridge in Charlotte.
Yeah.
And what did that bridge need, Miles?
Well, that bridge was the result of an inspection. That project was the result of an inspection by VTrans, and they inspect covered bridges every 2 years. And VTrans took a look at it, and they sent a letter to the town saying, if you don't fix these issues, we're going to shut this. You got to shut this bridge down immediately. I think they gave them a couple days, and this was really just an underpinning issue. There's some bearing blocks that were missing, and really that bridge is not in great shape, but it does carry traffic.
How could a bearing block come up missing?
Honestly, I'm not really sure because the water doesn't generally get that high there. It's so close to the lake.
So it's not like
and
it
it's
rotted
quite a ways
down and
above
disappeared.
the lake, even though this is our lowest bridge.
Yes, it is.
In the state, elevation-wise, yeah.
But it is the only bridge that has a view of Lake Champlain in the state of Vermont.
A great view. I mean, you're pretty much
does have
on
a beautiful
the lake.
view. It's right by the town beach there in Charlotte.
Exactly. Yeah, it's nice. I mean, it's about must be 6 or 7 feet above the water level. So it's not like the flooding took away the bearing blocks. And I'm not sure if the bearing blocks just never were there.
Were never.
Yeah, and it had just gotten missed before. Or yeah, I'm really not sure why they would have disappeared.
The actual inspection process that the AOT engineers do every 2 years is quite extensive. I'm understanding, and we probably are going to explore this a little bit further. But one of the things that we just recently encountered when we were doing the journals is because we wanted to put the clearance in, and I had contacted one of the engineers and talked to him about that, and he said, well, what clearance are you talking about? Because there is a horizontal clearance, which is the width of the bridge crosswise, to get, a vehicle through. And actually the narrowest portal, I believe, is on the Hall Covered Bridge down in Saxon River. But they're usually somewhere on the order of 15, maybe 17 feet. The widest one I know is up in Fairfax. The Maple Street Bridge has a very wide horizontal clearance. But he said, I think what you're talking about is the vertical clearance.
Of course.
And so we changed all of our verbiage in the journal to reflect vertical clearance. And he said that is one of the things that the inspectors double check when they go to inspect a bridge, because pavement can change. Absolutely. It can erode, or they can build the approaches up somehow. And so they actually take a tape measure and measure from the road surface up to the top, the top of the bridge. And get the vertical clearance right down to the inch. So you'll see in our bridging journals, it'll say 10 feet 6 inches or 10 feet 2 inches or whatever. And some of the states that we have been to, Indiana in particular, I'm thinking of, they put the vertical clearance figure right on the portal of the bridge, so that anyone that's approaching the bridge knows. Now we have signs.
Anyone who cares to look.
Right. But when you're taking a picture or you're looking at the bridge and here's the name of the bridge, the builder, and the year, and then the vertical clearance, it's right there, front and center, which we have signs that must be posted as you approach the bridge, saying what the vertical clearance is. But, as with anything else, signs can come up missing. And then they say, well, I didn't see any sign posted. I didn't know what the vertical clearance was, yada, yada. But the other two tide arch, there's 3 in the state. The Lakeshore is one. The other 2 are down in West Windsor. The Best Covered Bridge and the Bowers Covered Bridge. And those are the only 3 that have the tide arch in Vermont. So the variety of trusses that we have, the intricacy of some, versus the simplicity of others is a fascinating aspect, I think, to going to see covered bridges. And our goal with this podcast and video is that when people go to see a covered bridge, they can look at the truss and say, oh, I think this is a Burr arch, or this is a town truss, or this is a queen post, or a king post, which is a good thing to know for sure. My last question for you today, however, Mr. Jenness, is with your experience, and when I was writing up about Peter Paddleford, this question popped into my head, because Peter Paddleford, as I said, he worked on bridges for a number of years before he came up with his own truss design, which was never patented, but was widely used. So is designing a truss something that you envision doing with your experience in your later years of your career, or perhaps, maybe you've got one in the works now, for all I know?
Yeah, I've certainly designed trusses before, never for a bridge, but I do love truss work, and yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be fabulous, to...
We'll see. I can't say that I think that covered bridges are about to come back into vogue in terms of being on, replacing concrete
Right,
bridges, but
right. You probably
never
wouldn't
know.
be designing very many per se, but
You might.
everything new is young again sometimes. So, or everything old is young again. But
keep a lookout for the Jenness Truss.
yeah, there you go, the Jenness Truss, and you heard it here first. And so we do want to thank you so much for tuning in, for listening, for viewing the video, and I expect that we will have another video in May, and we'll be talking about all the different things that we're going to be doing with the towns that have covered bridges in May to celebrate the Vermont Covered Bridge Week in August. So stay tuned for that. Thank you very much.